November 1984, Hemlock County, Pennsylvania. It was one of those overcast days that seemed to settle over rural Pennsylvania like a heavy wool blanket. The weather had been in that strange transition between fall and winter for weeks, trees bare, fields muddy, and the sky the color of wet cement. That's when the Whitaker family decided to leave the city behind. Robert and Marlene Whitaker were in their early 40s. He worked in maintenance at a regional hospital, and she had just quit her job at a fabric store to start fresh. With them were their 3 children, Noah, 15, Grace, 13, and the youngest, Jamie, barely 7. They'd bought a farmhouse sight unseen. It was cheap. A white 2-story Victorian, built in 1906, with warped porch boards, rotting shutters, and 6 acres of land near the tree line of Old State Forest. A bank-owned property, the Realtor had said. Foreclosure. Bit of a fixer-upper, she admitted with a nervous laugh when Robert signed the deed. They moved in on December 2nd. Neighbors, what few there were, recalled the day because of the U-Haul that got stuck in the muddy driveway. 2 men with farm equipment had to help pull it out. That was the last time anyone saw the Whitaker family. July 2015, 30 years later. Rachel Myers had been selling houses in Hemlock County for 15 years. Not much moved in this area, she was lucky to close 2 properties a month. Mostly, she handled estates of the dead, divorces, and the kind of homes that hadn't had visitors in decades. The old Whitaker place was one of them. It had gone on and off market since the 90s, but never actually sold. People came to look and left quickly. The structure was sound, but something about it made people uneasy. Some said it smelled funny. Others complained of flickering lights or creaking sounds, even in still air. But Rachel didn't believe in any of that. Her job was to prepare the place to go up for auction one more time, maybe the bank would finally get lucky. She brought with her a notepad, her camera, and a new intern named Logan. It was early afternoon when they arrived. The house was cloaked in silence. Thick ivy covered the south side. The grass out back had grown waist-high. A rusted swing set peeked through the brush like skeletal remains. Inside, it was musty. Cold, though it was July. The air had that heavy, sour smell of rot and insulation. Rachel opened the windows. Logan took photos. They moved room to room. The wallpaper had curled in places. A child's crayon drawing was still stuck to the refrigerator. The living room ceiling had water damage, and some floorboards on the 2nd story bowed slightly. But then, Rachel noticed something odd. The basement door. It was locked. The basement. She jiggled the knob again. It didn't move. There was no key. Logan shrugged. Probably nothing, he said. But Rachel wasn't so sure. She'd been inside hundreds of old homes. There was always something in the basement. Old tools, maybe furniture. And besides, she needed photos for the auction listing. She went back to her car, got a small crowbar, and forced the door open. The smell hit them immediately, damp, earthy, but with an undercurrent of something else. Something sour. The stairs creaked as they descended. Rachel flicked on her flashlight. There were boxes. Rusted shelves. A stack of yellowed newspapers from 1983. A washing machine with a broken lid. And then, against the far wall, a false panel. It was barely noticeable. But the wood grain didn't match. It looked newer than the rest. Rachel approached, heart pounding. She touched it. The panel gave slightly under her fingers. Logan spoke up from behind her. There's something behind there. Behind the wall. The panel wasn't nailed or screwed. It slid to the left. What they saw behind it made Rachel recoil. There was a room, small, cramped, no more than 6 feet wide and 8 feet deep. The walls were concrete. No windows. In the center was a single wooden chair. On it was a stuffed rabbit. Its fur was matted with mold, one button eye missing. The walls were covered in chalk drawings. Circles, stick figures, crude shapes of houses and people with no faces. In the corner, barely visible in the dim light, sat a pile of children's shoes. Rachel stood frozen. Something about the room was deeply wrong. Logan said nothing. His camera was still in his hand, but he wasn't using it. There were no signs of rats or animals. No insects. Just dust, mildew, and that overwhelming feeling of pressure in the air. Rachel finally whispered, "Who built this?" A whisper of the past. The police came later that evening. They sealed off the basement. No remains were found. No signs of a struggle. But the child's shoes matched the approximate sizes of the Whitaker kids. There were 3 pairs, 2 smaller, 1 in adolescent size. The realtor, shaken, was told to stay quiet. There was no public release. No official statement. Not yet. But word spread anyway. In a town this small, it always does. Theories were everywhere. Some said the family had staged their own disappearance. Others believed something far darker. An old woman who lived 2 roads over remembered something. Said she'd seen lights on in the farmhouse for weeks after the Whitakers had supposedly vanished. Another man swore he'd heard screams in the forest that winter. But no one ever came forward. No new evidence emerged. Until 2 weeks later, when Rachel received a letter at her office. It had no return address. Inside was a single Polaroid. It showed the basement room. Same walls. Same chair. Only this time, someone was sitting in it. December 1984, the last winter. The Whitakers' first winter in the farmhouse was rough. Neighbors rarely saw them after the move-in day. The family kept mostly to themselves, except for the occasional trips to the nearest town, 5 miles away, for groceries or supplies. Marlene Whitaker was said to have grown withdrawn. Once a lively woman, she now spent most of her time inside, staring out of foggy windows at the barren fields. Robert was quieter than usual, working extra hours at the hospital. The children's school attendance records show all 3 were present, but the teachers later recalled that Noah, especially, became sullen and rarely spoke. One evening in late December, a local postman named George came by the farmhouse to deliver mail. He recalled the house seemed darker than usual. No smoke from the chimney. No lights through the windows. He called out, but no one answered. When he left, he thought nothing of it. Family and friends. A week before Christmas, Marlene's sister, Carol, tried to visit. She drove from the city, an hour away, hoping to bring some holiday cheer. At the farmhouse, Carol found the porch light on, but the door was locked. She knocked repeatedly but no one came. The mailbox was overflowing with unopened letters. Carol's calls to the family's phone went unanswered. She filed a missing persons report a few days later. Police investigation. The local sheriff, Jim Harden, visited the property. He found the house locked from the inside. Windows intact. No signs of forced entry or struggle. Inside, the house was mostly untouched, dishes in the sink, coats on hooks, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the kitchen table. The beds were made. No signs the family had planned to leave. The investigation went cold quickly. The Whitakers simply vanished without a trace. The Realtor's discovery. Back in 2015, Rachel Myers was determined to uncover any leads. She dug through old county records, newspaper archives, and library microfilms. What she found only deepened the mystery. The Whitakers had no criminal record, no history of mental illness, and no known enemies. Yet, the property history showed strange notes. In 1982, the house's previous owner, a man named Henry Collins, was found dead in the basement. Official cause: accidental carbon monoxide poisoning. However, some documents mentioned the discovery of strange symbols carved into the basement walls, symbols that had been painted over during renovations before the Whitakers bought the house. Symbols and shadows. Rachel shared this with a local historian, Dr. Elaine Turner. Elaine studied folklore and regional mysteries. She said those symbols were associated with old rituals, superstitions meant to ward off evil or trap spirits. Some believed the land itself was cursed, Elaine whispered, lowering her voice. Sometimes people would create protective charms, carvings, paintings, to keep something locked away. Rachel looked back at the photos of the basement room. The chalk drawings on the walls. Circles, figures without faces, were eerily similar to the carvings documented from Collins' time. The Polaroid. The mysterious Polaroid Rachel received showed a figure sitting in the basement room's chair. The face was blurry but unmistakably human. The photo's timestamp was smudged but indicated it was taken less than a month ago. Rachel wondered, was someone living there? Had the house been occupied recently? She decided to return with the police and investigate more thoroughly. Return to the farmhouse. The evening Rachel and officers came back to the property was cold and windy. They brought equipment to scan for hidden spaces, cameras, and even dogs trained to detect humans. As they descended the basement stairs, Rachel's flashlight caught faint scratches on the concrete floor near the chair. Fresh footprints. Noises echoed faintly, like whispering or soft crying, from behind the false panel. They pried it open again. Inside, the stuffed rabbit was gone. In its place was a small, worn notebook. The notebook. Rachel opened it carefully. Inside were entries, dated back to 1985, written in a shaky, childlike hand. The pages described a secret room, a dark presence, and a promise to keep everyone safe. Some pages had drawings similar to the chalk symbols on the walls. Rachel realized this was no ordinary disappearance. Something, or someone, had trapped the family in silence. January 2016, The Whispering. After Rachel handed the notebook over to the police, they scanned it for fingerprints. One partial print matched Marlene Whitaker's driver's license from 1985, a chilling confirmation. But the notebook wasn't old enough. Its paper stock and ink were modern, no more than 3 years old. Someone had been in the basement recently. Someone pretending to be one of the Whitaker children, or perhaps one of them had never truly left. Echoes in the cellar. The basement grew colder every time Rachel visited. On one occasion, when she stood near the carved wall with the symbols, her flashlight flickered, just once, but enough to make her breath catch. In the silence, she thought she heard a soft scratching. Like fingernails against concrete. She turned quickly. No one. But the shadows in the corners didn't sit right, like they moved when she wasn't looking. Local lore. Dr. Elaine Turner contacted Rachel again. She'd found something troubling. Before the farmhouse was built in 1912, the land belonged to a man named Thomas Vance, a preacher turned recluse, who believed he could trap demonic influences underground. Local folklore claimed Vance dug tunnels beneath his cabin and performed rituals to keep the dark beneath the soil. His entire congregation disappeared one autumn. Only a field of scorched grass and broken crosses remained. The farmhouse was built directly on that ground. A secret room. Rachel and the police returned one final time before the house was scheduled for demolition. This time, they brought a forensic team with ground-penetrating radar. Beneath the concrete slab in the far corner of the basement, under the spot where the symbols had been carved, they detected a hollow space. It wasn't on any blueprint. They broke through the concrete carefully. Underneath, a narrow stairwell descended into blackness. The air that rose up was ancient, like something had been sealed for decades. Descent. Rachel led the way down. The stairwell was rough-cut stone. The walls were moist, lined with scratches. At the bottom was a circular room no larger than 10 feet across. The floor was covered in soot. In the center was a stone platform, like an altar. And sitting on it was a dusty, leather-bound book with no title. Rachel reached for it with gloved hands. As she opened it, the room's temperature dropped sharply. Each page contained handwritten entries, prayers, or pleas, and symbols that matched the carvings upstairs. The last page was dated April 9, 1985. The entry was short. We tried to hold it. We prayed. We locked the doors. But it knows we're here. I see it now, even when I close my eyes. It wears our faces. The farmhouse burns. 1 week after the discovery, the farmhouse caught fire. Investigators believed the cause was electrical, but the house hadn't had power in years. Nothing was recovered from the underground room. The notebook, the altar, the stone, all gone. Rachel was devastated. But what disturbed her most was what she found later, tucked inside her mailbox at home. A new Polaroid. Another shot of the same basement chair. This time, the figure's face was more visible. It looked just like her. Psychological decline. Rachel began losing sleep. She heard faint whispers in her apartment at night. Once, while brushing her teeth, she saw a shadow dart behind her in the mirror. When she turned, no one was there. She reached out to Dr. Turner again. Turner admitted she had read the entire leather-bound book before the fire. She hadn't told the police everything. There were pages that warned, she said. That once you see it, once you open the door to its room, it knows you. Rachel felt cold settle in her bones. She began to question everything. Her identity, her memories, her own reflection. Unanswered questions. Who left the Polaroids? What was under the house, something ancient or something created by trauma? Was the Whitaker family ever really gone? Or had they simply become something else? April 1985, 1 month before the disappearance. Narrated through the found journal of Marlene Whitaker, recovered from a box in the Realtor's car trunk, dated and authenticated. Journal entry, April 2, 1985. The silence out here is deafening. It's not the kind of quiet I grew up with. It's not peaceful. There's something unnatural about it, like the land is holding its breath. Marlene Whitaker had always dreamed of moving to the country. She imagined long days of fresh air, chickens in the yard, her boys running barefoot in the grass. When Alan came home one night holding the yellow deed to an old farmhouse in Pine Hollow, she took it as a sign. A new start. They moved in March of 1985. By April, Marlene stopped writing letters to her sister. The phone line rarely worked, and Alan insisted they not bother the phone company. It's good to be off the grid. The boys start changing. David, age 9, and Caleb, 6, were healthy and bright. But shortly after the move, both boys began to sleepwalk. Alan would find them standing in the kitchen in the middle of the night, staring at the wall. Sometimes they mumbled something under their breath. When asked, they didn't remember anything. One night, Marlene followed them downstairs instead of waking them. David walked into the pantry and scratched something into the wood paneling with his fingernail. A symbol. The same kind later found in the basement. Journal entry, April 9, 1985. Alan doesn't want me writing anymore. He says I'm feeding it. He says the house listens. But if I don't write, I think I'll lose my mind. The dreams are getting worse. I wake up to scratching under the floorboards. David swears there's a voice behind the walls. He says it sounds like me. The locked room. There was one room in the house that remained locked from the day they moved in, an old cellar chamber beneath the stairs, sealed with rusted nails and a thick beam. Alan told the family it was unsafe. But Marlene saw him go down there twice at night, carrying something wrapped in cloth. When she confronted him, he denied everything. "You're not well," he said, almost kindly. "You haven't been sleeping." She started to question herself. Until she found the photographs. The film roll. Marlene had brought her old Polaroid with her from the city. One morning, while cleaning the boys' room, she found an exposed film roll tucked beneath David's mattress. They hadn't used film since moving. The photos showed blurry interior shots of the basement, images Marlene had never taken. One was of the basement chair. Another of Alan, kneeling, hands bloody, with something behind him in the dark. A shape. Not human. Not quite. She burned the photos. But the next night, they reappeared on her pillow. April 12, 1985, last entry. If someone finds this, please don't come here. Don't try to dig it up. Don't try to fix it. Some houses are meant to rot. There's something wrong with this place. Something buried. I think Alan brought us here to feed it. I think it wears his skin now. I don't know if I'm still me. I look in the mirror and my reflection lags behind. I can't remember what I sound like. I've hidden David and Caleb in the walls. They'll be safe there. It can't crawl. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm insane. But if I'm not, burn the house. Burn it all. Back to 2016, the Realtor's revelation. Rachel, reading this final entry, began to cry. She didn't know why. Something about Marlene's words felt like they'd been written directly to her. The realtor who found the journal, Tom Harper, admitted something he hadn't told police. After the fire, he returned one last time to retrieve tools he'd left in the garage. Inside, resting on the floor, was a Polaroid photograph. Rachel, smiling. Standing in front of the farmhouse porch. She had never posed for that photo. And she had never worn the dress in the picture. Pine Hollow, October 12, 2016, 1 week after the fire. The farmhouse was gone. A blackened husk stood in its place, skeletonized wood rising from the scorched field like ribs from a corpse. Locals crossed themselves as they drove by. Teenagers dared each other to step past the rusted gate. No one lasted more than a minute. They all said the same thing. It's too quiet. Rachel can't sleep. Since reading Marlene's final journal entry, Rachel had stopped sleeping through the night. She kept hearing a faint click under her bed. She moved out of the house and into a motel, but the clicking followed. She recorded it. Played it back. The audio file was blank. She took a photo of the room. In the mirror behind her, there was something pale and thin watching from the edge of the frame. She deleted it. The photo returned the next morning, printed on the motel's lobby printer. No one admitted to doing it. The man with the hat. 3 nights after the fire, Rachel received a call. Unknown number. A voice that sounded old and broken. He was never supposed to bring them there. The man refused to say his name, but gave an address. Fieldstone Memorial Cemetery. Whitaker Plot. Midnight. Rachel went. She didn't know why. She brought a flashlight and a camera. At 12:04 a.m., an old man stepped out from behind a headstone, dragging a cane behind him. He handed her a folder and said, "If you open it, you can't go back to the life you had." Then he walked into the woods and never came out the other side. The police never found him. Inside the folder. Inside were A faded photograph of Alan Whitaker, dated 1963, standing in front of a brick building labeled Red Pines Institute for the Criminally Insane. A birth certificate for David L. Whitaker, with a red X through the name. A page torn from a field report, signed by a Dr. Jonas Merrill, titled Subject 14, Emergent Symbolic Language in Juvenile Host-Responsive Sites, C. Whitaker, Alan, Unverified Occult Activity. At the bottom of the page was a hand-drawn version of the symbol from the basement. Next to it, in a child's handwriting. He lives in the walls. Rachel's mirror moves. That night, Rachel stared into her motel mirror for hours. At 2:43 a.m., she blinked. And in that split second, her reflection didn't. It watched her. She threw the mirror in the trash. The motel staff found it back on the wall the next morning. Clean. Unbroken. Rachel checked out. The Realtor's regret. Tom Harper, the Realtor, began receiving letters. No return address. All postmarked from Pine Hollow. Each letter contained only one thing. A page from a child's drawing book. Crayons. Rough pencil work. Each one showing the farmhouse, viewed from different angles, but in every sketch, there was a face in the window, even when the house was drawn as burnt to the ground. The final drawing, received on Halloween, was different. It showed Rachel, asleep in her motel bed. Outside the window, the farmhouse. Whole. Lit from within. And the door was open. A new discovery. Rachel returned to the property one last time. She walked the blackened field alone. As she passed the wreckage of what was once the basement stairs, her foot caught on something buried in the earth. She knelt. Brushed it away. A rusted door handle. It was metal. Not part of the original structure. She called Tom. Together, they dug until they hit concrete. A flat slab. 4 feet wide. It had no hinges. No seams. No visible way to lift it. But it was cold. And humming. And on its surface, barely visible beneath the soot. The symbol. Carved in a child's hand. Fieldstone Asylum, August 7, 1963. 19 years before the Whitakers vanished. He doesn't speak like a child. He doesn't blink when the lights flicker. He waits until everyone's asleep before saying a word. Dr. Jonas Merrill, Case Log Number 014, David L. Whitaker. They called him David, but he refused the name. He said he had no name. He said names give others power. And he didn't want to be owned again. The doctors believed he was a trauma case. The other patients wouldn't go near him. One nurse found a triangle scratched into her skin in her sleep. David smiled when she quit. Present day, Rachel investigates the asylum. Rachel drove 3 hours to the ruins of Fieldstone Institute. Closed in 1972 after a patient uprising and fire. Most of the records had burned. But in the basement, she found a box marked Archive, Merrill/Whitaker. Inside were fragments. A drawing of a house with no doors. A report labeled Object Transference, Mirror Episodes. And a list of names, crossed out one by one, ending with Marlene Whitaker, pending. At the bottom of the page, scribbled hastily in blue ink. It follows the bloodline. Do not return to the house. Break the glass. Do not look directly at him. Rachel stared at that line for a long time. Then realized something horrifying. The symbol wasn't just on the paper. It was being drawn, slowly, into the dust on the wall behind her. And no one was holding the pen. 1985, a child wakes in the dark. Marlene Whitaker was 9 years old when she began sleepwalking. Her mother, Clara, would find her standing in corners. Not facing out, facing the wall. She'd whisper. "He talks behind it. He's lonely." Alan, her father, began sealing the windows with black curtains. He said light was the problem. That light opened something. But light wasn't the issue. It was the mirrors. Anything reflective, gone. Shiny pans, glass frames, even puddles. Alan smashed them all. Until one morning, Marlene found a shard in the barn. She looked into it. And what she saw wasn't her. It was another girl. Same face. But the girl in the glass had no eyes. And her mouth was moving. Marlene dropped the shard and ran. Behind her, the glass shimmered. And a small, pale hand pushed against it from the inside. Present, something opens below the farm. Rachel and Tom return to the slab beneath the ashes. This time, Rachel brings an old field compass. The needle spins wildly when placed on the stone. A quiet vibration builds beneath them. They bring in a contractor to try to cut the slab. His saw snaps in half. He packs up and refuses to come back. Says the basement feels like being watched by something that isn't alive but still knows your name. Rachel stays behind. She places her palm on the stone. It's colder than ice. And then, she hears it. From beneath the concrete. A knock. Then another. And a voice. Childlike. Faint. "Are you still up there, Marlene?" Part 7, The House That Watches. June 5, 1985, Whitaker family moves in. It was a Tuesday when they arrived. The farmhouse stood alone between two sloping hills, encircled by thick trees and miles from the nearest neighbor. Clara Whitaker loved the isolation. Alan, her husband, called it God's own quiet. But Marlene, their daughter, said something different. As they pulled up the gravel path, she whispered in the back seat. "It's not alone." She was right. The house had stood abandoned for over 40 years. The previous owners, the Halvorsons, had fled in 1943, leaving everything: furniture, photographs, clothes. Even food in the pantry, now rotted to powder. Clara spent the first 2 days cleaning out the bedrooms. Behind one dresser, she found a single baby shoe. It was small, old-fashioned, and had something scribbled on the sole in what looked like charcoal. "Don't follow the whispers." She tossed it into a trash bag. But that night, it was back, sitting on the windowsill, facing in. June 10, 1985, The Mirrors. It started with Alan. He began waking at 3:03 a.m., always at the same time. Each night, he'd stand in the hallway, staring at the bathroom mirror. One morning, Clara found him whispering at it. She crept up behind and touched his shoulder. He spun around, eyes vacant, as if he didn't know her. "It's not a reflection," he muttered. "It's a door." He refused to explain. But the next day, all the mirrors were gone, buried behind the barn. That night, Marlene started speaking in her sleep. Phrases that didn't sound like her. Languages Clara didn't recognize. June 17, 1985, tapes begin. Alan set up a camcorder in the hallway. He said he wanted to catch the movements. Clara didn't ask what that meant. The first tape showed nothing but stillness. The second, faint sounds. Whispering, low and layered. As if someone were speaking in reverse. By the fifth tape, Alan stopped showing Clara what he recorded. He locked them in a box in the basement. She didn't argue. Until one night, she heard her own voice on the stairs, calling her name from 2 floors below. But she was alone in the bedroom. Present day, Rachel plays the tape. Rachel sits in the basement with a portable tape player. The label reads, June 21st, don't listen alone. She clicks play. At first, just silence. Then crackling, and the sound of Clara Whitaker crying. A shaky voice, between sobs. If anyone ever finds this, don't open the slab. Don't dig. We tried to leave. But it already knew we wanted to. And now it copies us. It. Suddenly, the sound distorts, as if something is pressing on the tape from within. A second voice overlaps Clara's. It's Marlene. But younger. And wrong. He said we'll stay. Forever. He said you'll join soon too. We'll make a new family. And you'll be the mirror. Click. The tape stops. Rachel is frozen. Behind her, the compass starts spinning again. The needle breaks off. And upstairs, something heavy just fell to the floor. But she's the only one here. June 25, 1985, they tried to run. Clara packed the car before dawn. Alan was no longer Alan. He didn't sleep, didn't blink, didn't respond when she spoke. Marlene had drawn hundreds of the same image in crayon, a black door with hands crawling out. Clara locked them both in the master bedroom and ran outside with the keys. She got in the car. Inserted the keys. Turned the ignition. Silence. Then smoke. Black smoke poured from the vents. The steering wheel trembled violently, and the radio turned on, no music, just the sound of distant breathing. Then Clara saw it in the rearview mirror. A third shape. In the back seat. Small. Smiling. And with her daughter's voice. She screamed. But the smoke swallowed the sound. Present, Rachel finds the third camera. Hidden in the walls near the basement, Rachel discovers a second compartment. Inside. A notebook written in a child's shaky handwriting. A camera. And something else wrapped in plastic, a lock of hair tied with a ribbon. The last page of the notebook reads. They left their voices here. So I can wear them. Now I have mommy's laugh. Tomorrow, I'll take yours too. The page ends with the same strange triangle symbol. Rachel doesn't sleep that night. And in the morning, she finds the ribbon. Tied around her bedroom doorknob. Part 8, The Night They Disappeared. June 27, 1985, the last night. The house was quiet, but it was not empty. Marlene sat on the floor of her bedroom, tracing the triangle symbol in the dust with trembling fingers. Her mother's voice from the tape echoed in her mind, "It copies us. It's here." The lights flickered, then went out. Alan's footsteps came down the hallway, slow, deliberate. But his face was gone. His eyes were empty holes. "Come with me," he said in a voice that wasn't his own. Clara clutched her diary, a small leather-bound book filled with scribbled warnings and desperate prayers. She followed him to the basement door. It had never been locked before. But now it was. The lock clicked open by itself. Inside, the air was cold. Thick with the smell of earth and something metallic. The faint sound of a child laughing echoed, but it wasn't Marlene's. The basement chamber. Alan stepped forward. His shadow stretched on the walls, twisting, growing. On the floor, a large mirror leaned against the wall, covered in a black cloth. Alan pulled it away. In the reflection, Clara saw not herself, but a dark room, endless, filled with shadows moving just beyond sight. A voice whispered from the glass. "Join us." Marlene ran to her mother, but the floor beneath her cracked and splintered. She stumbled, reaching for the mirror's edge. Suddenly, the triangle symbol glowed faintly on the glass. It pulsed, then shattered inward like a spiderweb of cracks. Marlene disappeared. Clara's last entry. If you find this, don't trust the reflections. The house watches. The house waits. Alan is gone. Marlene is gone. I don't know what's left of me. She left the diary on the kitchen table. The house was silent again. By dawn, the farmhouse was empty. No one saw the Whitakers leave. Part 9, Detective Reynolds. Present day, Rachel's search attracts attention. Detective Mark Reynolds is a man with a secret. He's been investigating the Whitaker case for years. More than anyone else. He grew up in the nearby town, just a child when the family vanished. But Reynolds has no memory of the night he spent on the Whitaker farm. No memory at all before age 10. His earliest recollections are scattered nightmares. Meeting Rachel. They meet at the local library. Reynolds looks tired but alert. His eyes flicker with something unspoken. Most people think the Whitakers just walked away, he says, voice low. But I know that's not true. Something dragged them out. Something alive. Rachel shows him the tape, the notebook, the hair ribbon. He studies them, then freezes. This symbol, he says quietly. I saw it once. On my mother's necklace. Before she disappeared. Rachel's heart races. Reynolds pulls out a faded photo, his mother, smiling next to a woman Clara Whitaker. Fragments of memory. Reynolds explains his memories come in pieces. A child running through the woods at night. A mirror reflecting something not his own face. A voice whispering in the dark. You're next. He believes his mother was involved in something dangerous. And now, with Rachel's findings, he thinks the farmhouse holds the key to both their pasts. The hidden room. Together, they return to the farm. Using the notebook's clues, they find a trapdoor beneath the kitchen floorboards. The air beneath smells of old wood and mold. Inside, a small, windowless room, walls covered in scratched symbols. In the center, an old wooden chair, bound with rusted chains. On the floor, another mirror, cracked, but intact. Rachel reaches out, finger trembling. Reynolds grabs her wrist. Don't touch it. Whatever's here, it feeds off us. A whisper in the dark. The room grows cold. A voice, barely audible, curls around them. I'm still here. Waiting for you. Rachel's flashlight flickers. And in the corner, a pale figure watches. Not quite human. Not quite shadow. Part 10, The Shadow in the Corner. The cold was unbearable. Rachel could see her breath forming small clouds in the stale air of the hidden room. Detective Reynolds's grip on her wrist tightened, anchoring her in reality. The pale figure didn't move, but its presence filled the small space like a suffocating fog. Its eyes, deep black voids, seemed to pierce through their very souls. The voice returns. The whisper rose again, clearer this time, words dripping with a strange sadness. You shouldn't have come back. The mirror takes, but it also keeps. We are trapped between the cracks, forgotten pieces, echoes of a family torn apart. Rachel shivered. Who are you? She whispered. The figure's form flickered and shifted, revealing glimpses of a small girl, Marlene. I'm what's left. A shadow made from fear and fragments. The mirror broke me, but it didn't let me go. Reynolds's revelation. Detective Reynolds swallowed hard. I remember now, he said, voice barely steady. The night I disappeared. I was here. The mirror tried to pull me in, too. He turned to Rachel. This house isn't just a place. It's a prison, for souls caught between worlds. The mirror's curse. Rachel's eyes fell on the cracked mirror. In its fractured surface, images flickered. Scenes from the past, frozen moments. Clara Whitaker crying in the kitchen. Alan staring blankly into the bathroom mirror. Marlene's small hand reaching through the cracked glass. Suddenly, the mirror shimmered, and the room felt like it expanded, stretching into a vast void filled with whispers. The voice echoed again. To leave, you must replace. A soul for a soul. A reflection for a reflection. The decision. Reynolds and Rachel exchanged a look, both understanding the terrible choice before them. If they wanted answers. If they wanted to free the trapped family. They had to risk becoming part of the house's collection. Sudden noise. Before they could decide, a loud crash echoed from upstairs, the sound of breaking glass. Rachel's heart raced. Someone else is here, she said. Reynolds nodded, pulling his flashlight from his jacket. Or, something. Rachel and Detective Reynolds moved cautiously up the creaking stairs, the beam of their flashlight slicing through the dense darkness. The old farmhouse groaned around them, as if protesting their intrusion. Every step echoed loudly, breaking the oppressive silence that had hung over the house for decades. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched long and shadowed, lined with peeling wallpaper stained by years of neglect. The smell of damp wood and something metallic hung thick in the air. The shattered glass was near the front window. Shards scattered like glitter on the floor, catching the faint light and reflecting it back like tiny stars. But the window itself was closed, the latch secure, no one could have come in or out through it. Reynolds bent down, examining the shards. This wasn't broken recently, he muttered. The dust on these is at least a week old. Whoever was here hasn't left in a while. Rachel's eyes darted around the hallway, settling on the cracked doorway of what used to be the master bedroom. The door hung half off its hinges. Suddenly, a low creak echoed behind them. They spun around, flashlights cutting through the darkness, but the hallway was empty. Then, from the far end of the hallway, a soft humming began, a lullaby, haunting and distant, but unmistakably real. The hidden room. Drawn by the eerie tune, they approached a door Rachel hadn't noticed before. It was smaller, more hidden behind a collapsed bookshelf. Reynolds pushed the debris aside and opened the door. The room inside was surprisingly intact, dusty toys scattered on the floor, a small cot with threadbare blankets, and walls covered in faded children's drawings. On the desk lay a stack of old photographs, yellowed and curling at the edges. Rachel picked one up. It was a family photo, the Whitakers, smiling, standing proudly in front of the farmhouse. But someone was missing, the youngest child, Marlene. A second photo slipped from the pile, this one showed a man standing next to the family. His face was sharp, with dark eyes full of suspicion and something else, regret. Reynolds's hand trembled as he recognized the man immediately. "That's my father," he whispered. The connection. Rachel's heart pounded. "Your father? But, what was he doing here?" Reynolds swallowed hard. "My father was a local sheriff. He investigated the Whitaker disappearance briefly, but then he stopped. Officially, the case went cold. Unofficially, I think he was hiding something." He unfolded a faded newspaper clipping he had pulled from his jacket, the headline screamed. "Local sheriff suspended amid controversy in missing family case. Secrets beneath the floor." Reynolds and Rachel searched the hidden room further. Beneath the cot's wooden slats, they found a loose floorboard. It creaked as they pried it up, revealing a narrow crawlspace beneath the house. Rachel shone her light inside. The crawlspace was cramped but contained something, a bundle of old letters tied with a faded blue ribbon. They brought the letters back to the kitchen table, carefully opening the fragile envelopes. The handwriting was delicate but hurried, Clara Whittaker's. Clara's letters. The letters were addressed to a J, the man Reynolds now suspected was his father. In the letters, Clara begged for help, describing strange noises, shadows moving in the house, and her fear for her family's safety. One letter stood out. They come for us at night. The mirror shows them our faces, but their eyes are hollow. I fear my husband has been taken already. Please, if you read this, save my children. The last letter ended abruptly. A haunting revelation. Rachel looked up. If Clara wrote these to your father, then why didn't he do anything? Reynolds's face twisted with pain. Because he was scared. Or worse, involved. Suddenly, a soft knock echoed on the kitchen door. Both froze. Rachel's hand went instinctively to her phone, but there was no signal. The knocking continued, slow, deliberate. Part 12, The Truth Unearthed. The knocking ceased as mysteriously as it had started. The house fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the steady ticking of the old kitchen clock. Rachel and Reynolds exchanged wary glances, then slowly opened the door. No one stood there. Only the cold wind swept through the porch, carrying a faint scent of earth and forgotten secrets. The basement key. On the doorstep lay a small, rusty key tied to a note. Rachel picked up the note, her hands trembling. The past never truly dies. Find the place where shadows sleep. Reynolds recognized the handwriting instantly. It's from Clara, he said softly. Back to the basement. The key fit the old lock perfectly. As they descended into the basement, the darkness seemed to thicken. This time, however, they saw more, remnants of old furniture, children's toys, and on the far wall, an almost invisible crack. Rachel ran her fingers along the edge of the crack. It felt cold, unnatural. Reynolds searched for a mechanism and found a hidden latch. With a deep breath, he pulled it. Behind the wall. A narrow passage revealed itself, leading into a small chamber bathed in faint blue light. In the center lay a worn diary and a faded portrait. Reynolds opened the diary. The handwriting was Clara's, her last words chronicling their final days in the farmhouse. We found a mirror, but not just any mirror. It's a doorway, a trap. My husband fell through it first. The house is alive, feeding on our fears. I hid Marlene here, hoping to save her from the darkness. The final revelation. Rachel's eyes caught the portrait, a family photo, but with a chilling detail. Every face was reflected in a cracked mirror, except one. Marlene's. She was nowhere to be seen, but her shadow stretched long and dark. Suddenly, the air shifted, and a faint whisper drifted. Not all shadows want to leave. Reynolds closed the diary, his hands shaking. We freed them, or at least we tried. But some things, some souls, stay trapped. The house keeps what it wants. Leaving the farmhouse. They ascended the stairs, the weight of the house's history heavy on their shoulders. Outside, the morning sun was breaking through the clouds. Rachel looked back once more. The farmhouse stood silent, but somehow, it felt like it was watching. Epilogue, Aftermath. Weeks later, Reynolds returned to the town, sharing the truth about the Whittakers with the local sheriff. The farmhouse was sealed, declared unsafe. But in the quiet, Rachel kept the diary, feeling its presence. Some nights, she swore she could hear the lullaby again, faint and sad, reminding her that some mysteries never truly end.